Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am the Survival Architect, you can call me Liv, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at my Minecraft tier list of farms. So as you can see behind me, we've got 5 different levels. We've got the poop level down the bottom, D, C, B, A and the S level up the top. That's 6 levels, not 5. And we are going to be populating that with this board full of items here. So the thing we should note is that some things are generalized. This coral here is all corals, so not just a tube coral. This chicken here is all the cooked types of chicken. This rabbit here is not cooked rabbit, it's me being dumb and referring to that as just rabbit items in general. There are also some other generalizations as well. We have, where do we have it? Like this flower over here and this rose are both just general small flowers and big flowers. This moss over here is all the moss items, so that's moss carpets and azaleas as well. But yeah, other than that, we should just hop straight into it. So we're going to start at the bottom with the poop tier, and the first thing we're going to do with that is the brown mushroom, the hanging roots, and the twisting and the different kinds of nether vines that exist. So I have a few reasons for this. The brown mushrooms, or just the mushrooms in general, good farm. It can be useful for making things like fermented spider eyes, but there's not many uses for mushrooms, and it's a very slow farm and a bit painful to set up. So really, it's not that much fun in this game, and not really that useful either. Like, you can just go out and collect mushrooms on their own. The hanging roots are kind of the same. They're not too hard to collect without a farm, and there's very limited uses for them. You can only really use them to craft rooted dirt and decorate some specific, or in some specific styles. The vines from the nether are kind of the same. They're not really that useful in the main game, and they're only useful with some decoration. And they're also not that hard to collect. Just go to the nether and grab some of them and just break the bottom block, and everything should be fine. Now, the next thing we're going to put up there might actually surprise some people. It's the seagrass and the scoot. Now, both of these relate to turtles. So seagrass really isn't useful for placing down. You can just kind of bone meal underwater and it appears. The other thing a farm of it is useful for is breeding up turtles. And turtles are really only useful for their scoots. And yeah, sure, scoots can be used to craft the turtle helmets, but they're not really that useful outside of the first kind of until you get enchanted, which usually doesn't take that long. As soon as you have respiration, aqua affinity, there's not really that much use for these. So that's why they're going down here on the poop tier. Now, the last couple of things that I have on here are the chorus fruit, the music disc, and where is it? The cocoa bean farms. So, chorus fruit, only useful for crafting up, what are they called? Oh, for first being smelted in a furnace to create the popped chorus fruit, and then for crafting the end rods. But the thing is, you can just go to the end and collect up a whole bunch of these really, really quickly. It's probably less efficient to make a farm time-wise, and, you know, it's not that hard to collect them. Same with a lot of these other things. The music discs, which somehow have made their way out of my inventory. Music discs, I mean, you can just kind of come across these by chance in the world. When a skeleton shoots a creeper and kills it, it will drop a music disc rather than gunpowder. But the thing is, they're not really that good. If you want to play Minecraft music, you can just use YouTube for that. It's pretty self-explanatory. And the last one down here is the cocoa beans. Really only used to make these brown blocks like I've used for the poop tier. But other than that, there's not many uses for them. And they're kind of painful to farm. You have to place them in by hand on jungle logs. You have to go out and find the cocoa beans. Like, you only really build this farm as a last resort. You don't normally build it because it's something fun to do. It's just if you need brown dye, you use it. So that's my entries on the poop tier. It's pretty sparse, but most things in Minecraft are relatively useful. So we are going to move up to the D tier now. Now, the first couple of things I'm going to put in the D tier are relating to plants. So, we have the drip leaf, or the big drip leaf, sea pickle, and the small flower farms. So, let's put these up here on the board. Okay, my rationale for this. The small flower farms are a fun project to put together, but they aren't really useful outside of the dyes, and you can get most of the stuff needed for all the other dyes by using the large flowers, which are much easier to farm. You don't need any moving floors for those. You can just bone meal the flowers themselves and they pop off, and then are regenerated. So that it's really, the large flower farms are really helpful. These not so much. If you want to make them the most efficient, you use a flower forest biome, but there are also some flowers that are really annoying to get when the colors are kind of already available from the large flower farm. Now, the sea pickle, once again, a relatively fun farm, although you do have to use water for this, and you have to get coral, and you have to set up a moving floor, and it just becomes a bit painful. Also, they aren't really that useful. On land, they just kind of turn into these ugly green splodges, and in the water, yes, they emit light, but, you know, no, just go and collect them by hand and then bone meal them if you need to. It's not the most fun thing to collect. Now, the big drip leaf. It's kind of useful. Like if you stand on it, it drops off. That's kind of the point of the drip leaf. In the current version of Minecraft 1.17, you can't get these outside of Wandering Trader, and they're just not really that useful outside of something like a spleef game, a vanilla spleef game. So, you know, not the most fun thing to farm either. It's just bone meal and they grow and then you fire a piston and it breaks. So, you know, not the most fun farm, but it's up there. Now, the next thing we're going to put up there may be a bit of a surprise, but it's going to be the magma and the squid, or the ink sac, and just the regular ink sac. So, rationale for these. Magma, really easy to collect in the nether. You just kind of dig it out and then you've got it in your inventory. There's also not that many uses for magma. You've got it for water elevators and for killing systems. And other than that, there's not many uses for it. So, and a bit for decoration. So building a dedicated magma cream farm to craft the magma blocks, not really that worth it. Like, just go and collect the magma yourself. It doesn't take long to fill up a full shulker box, and that's really all you need for a while. Now, this other one is the ink sac, and a lot of people probably thinking, why the ink sac? Like, that's something I always need. Well, it's only really useful for crafting books and quills, which you don't really need that often, and for crafting black dye. And the thing is, there's a much better and more useful item that we'll get to yet later that can be used to craft black dye. Also, building squid farms sucks. They aren't fun to make. They're kind of annoying to clear out a river. And yeah, just water getting in the way of your farm, it's just painful. I really dislike squid farms. So, let's move on now that I have explained those. And we are going to grab the vine and the glow lichen. Now, both of these are generally decoration blocks. They can look good on the sides of things, like the glow lichen, especially on kind of cottagey builds, and the vines on cottagey builds look really good. But other than that, there's not really that many uses for them, and they're not really that fun to make. So yeah, they're just going to be sitting here in the D tier. The next thing we're going to put up there is the amethyst. The amethyst shard, pretty cool item, can be used to make the spyglass, but other than that, it's got and to craft up amethyst blocks, but amethyst blocks don't really look that great in a lot of contexts. So the spyglass, I mean, I have Optifine Zoom. I can use the Optifine Zoom, so it's really not useful for me. And they're really slow. Like they produce like 100 items an hour, or every 90 minutes or so. So really not that quick, which is why it's going on the D tier here. Not fast, not really that fun to put together. You have to clear out a full geode and then set up a bunch of painful redstones. The next things I'm going to put up there are the glowberry and the netherwart. So I have a couple of reasons for this. Glowberries, yeah, they're useful for decoration, but other than that, they're not a very good food source. And the farms, once again, not really that fun to make. Netherwart, it's not really a fully automatic farm. You have to kind of sit in a minecart and then go round and round and round, placing all the netherwart in and breaking any that has grown to full height. So, you know, not the best farm to put together, not super fun. Not super fun either, but they both do have some very limited uses, especially the netherwart. It can be used for brewing, which, I mean, I don't do much of, but hey, some people do. So, now that we've put the netherwart and glowberry up here, we are done with the D tier. So, there weren't that many in the D tier. There's There's not many items that are kind of this annoying to get. Both of these tiers aren't great, but let's move up to the C tier. Now, these are some pretty quality farms in Minecraft. And the first one that we're going to put in the C tier is the cooked meat farm. And this is a pretty common one for people to make. It's not too annoying to make. Like, you just put a bunch of chickens or small cows under some lava, and when they grow up, they burn in the lava and drop out some cooked meat, which you pick up with a hopper. Really useful farm for early game food, but you know, as you get on further into the late game, they just end up causing a whole bunch of lag and being a bit annoying. The next thing we're going to do is the Slowness Arrow. Now, these can be farmed from strays, which are skeletons that spawn in certain biomes, but Slowness Arrows are just kind of annoying. They aren't really that good for PvP, and in a single player world, they're just not that useful. So that's why they're going on the C tier. They can be useful, but not really. And you can also get them from Fletchers, which are a villager type. So that will come later in the video. The next thing that's going to go up there is the spider-only mob farm. Now, spiders can put out string and spider eyes, but you'd be better off just making a general purpose mob farm for those items, because, you know, with just the spider only farm, yeah, it can be pretty efficient, but not the average human doesn't need 100,000 string an hour. That's just not, that's only Psycraft that needs that, not us normal people. So you really just need a general purpose mob farm for those items, not a massive 100,000 item an hour spider only mob farm. The next thing we're going to put up there is this Basalt. Now, Basalt is pretty good for a decoration block. And it can be farmed by having lava next to blue ice, and then just having the player there breaking it with a pickaxe, or using a TNT blast chamber. Now, Basalt's pretty good for decoration. You can make it smooth by smelting it, but outside of decoration, there's not really that many uses for it. Pretty fun farm to put together, though, and I like to use Basalt in my builds. So that's going on the C tier. It's not the best farm to build, but, you know, it's functional and really helpful at certain times. Now, the next thing we want to put on the tier list is the coral farm. So, once again, a purely decorative block. Coral in general, really good for aquariums. See my previous single player survival episode for that. Really useful for aquariums, but outside of that, really not that helpful. Farmable, but not that fun. Also, yeah, not too fun to put together. You need to work with water, which is always a pain in redstone builds. Like, you don't want to be washing away your redstone. So that's going on the C tier as well. The next thing along the same vein is the pointed dripstone. Purely decorative block. You can use it in very limited capacity for a killing mechanism. If you are a mumbo jumbo and you don't want to be killing anything in an entire season. But other than that, not really that useful. Just decoration, and the dripstone block is kind of ugly anyway. So, you know, it's going on the C tier as well. The next two things I'm going to put on this tier, on the C tier, is kelp and your general crop farm. So any crop, that could be potatoes or carrots or wheat. Now, I have a couple of reasons for this. Kelp, useful as a fuel when you smelt it down and then craft it up, but you also have to smelt it down and craft it up. Kind of a painful process, and then there are also better fuel sources out there that come just as a fuel source, so you don't have to do any crafting, you don't have to do any smelting of the items you get to make them a fuel. They just are a fuel, whereas kelp, you know, bit annoying, but useful as a fuel. And also the kelp blocks, the dried kelp blocks, are relatively nice as a building block in certain circumstances. Now, the general crop farms, they're useful for trading with villagers, but as soon as you've got a farmer villager which is higher than the first tier, you get melon and pumpkin trades. Melon and pumpkin farms don't require villagers, they're pretty lag friendly, and they're really efficient, so it's not really that hard to get a whole lot of melons and pumpkins. So that's why the crop farm and the kelp farm are both going on the C tier. Similar to the D tier, we are going to be putting the large flowers on the C tier. So unlike the small flower farm, the large flowers can be popped off and regenerated with just one bone meal. No moving floors required, nothing like that. They're pretty easy to set up. They also produce, I think there are 5 different tall flowers, and combining them together and doing some funky things with bone meal and black dye, you can end up with pretty much every color in Minecraft, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think. So that's also going on the C tier. The last two items I'm going to put on the C tier are going to be Blaze Farms and also the Phantom Membrane Farms. Now, the Blaze Farm, once again, good fuel source. Also useful for making potions. You need them for the brewing stand, and then you also need blaze powder to fuel the brewing stand. But in the nether, they're kind of painful to set up, and you know they only drop blaze rods if the player kills them, which means you need a player there killing them. It just becomes a bit painful. So they're going on the C tier. Pretty useful farm, but really, really painful. And it's in the nether. Everything hates you in the nether. You know, you're probably going to get set on fire at some point. I don't want that. Now, the other one is the Phantom Membrane. Now, Phantom Membranes are used for repairing Elytra, but other than that, they're kind of useless. So that's why they're going on the C tier. Pretty fun farm to put together. The player kind of stands in a box and then kills all the phantoms to get funneled towards it. But other than that, not really that useful. So that's why it's going on the C tier. We're now done with the C tier and we're going to move up to one more tier to the B tier. These are going to be some really quality farms. The first two things I'm going to put on the B tier are the coal farm and the raid farm. Now, coal can be collected from wither skeletons. The wither skeleton skull farm will come later. But it can be separated out into coal using a sorting system. And just coal on its own, I mean, pretty good fuel source. It lasts for 8 items in a furnace. Can also be crafted into blocks if you want to transport it in large quantities. But otherwise, it is really just a fuel for your furnaces. Now, the raid farm produces a lot of emeralds and a lot of these totems of undying, which prevent you from dying if you are holding one. But they also produce an awful lot of XP for the player. But they're a real pain to set up. Like, they require a lot of redstone trickery, and it's just, or even manipulating the game in funny ways, and it's just a real pain to set up. So that's why they're both going on the B tier. Good item, but ultimately only one use. Very good farm, but painful to set up. Now, the next thing that's going to go up there is the glow ink and the copper. Oh, lost the glow ink. Now, glow ink farms, I mean, I'm using glow item frames. They require glow ink. You also need, to make signs look like this, you need glow ink to make them kind of pop, or in that case, poop. But, you know, outside of that, not really that many uses, but it's a new item. It's a fun thing to make in 1.17 if you are bored and you want to experiment with some new farms that you could make. And the other one is the copper farm. Now, if you didn't know, drowned have a 11% chance to drop copper when killed with a looting 3 sword. So what you can do is set up some sort of zombie mob farm or use a zombie spawner, convert them into drowned, and then kill them all. And they will drop copper. But it's a pretty slow farm. You're better off to just go mining for it at like Y30 or so, and you'll find a whole lot of copper there. And other than that, it produces a lot of XP, but other than that, it just produces rotten flesh, which is kind of useless. So the copper farm gets a B tier, as does the glow ink farm. The next farm to go up there is going to be the moss farm and the spawner-based mob farm. So, moss, incredibly good block for decorating. And this also includes all its variants. So, azalea, moss carpet, and flowering azalea. Really good for decorating. It fits in really well with grass, especially in things like the mushroom biome. Grass is really, really nice in the mushroom biome. So the moss block is really, really good for that, as is the moss carpet for making kind of details, and so is the flowering azalea and the azalea. It can also be used to produce an awful lot of bone meal. Impulse SV has a really great farm on Hermitcraft. Go check that out if you want to see how moss can be used for making a whole bunch of bone meal. But other than that, it's really just a decorative block. Really nice decorative block. Really fun farm to put together. Uses stone generators, and moss doesn't like to be pushed by pistons, so it just pops straight out. Really, really cool farm. It's a really cool concept, and it's a new block. But other than that, it's an okay item. You could do without it in your world. It's not necessary to keep building more stuff. Now, the other thing is the spawner-based mob farm. Really good to get a whole lot of things like bones, especially if you find a skeleton mob grinder. Zombie, I mean, that's just useful for XP. We don't talk about spider mob grinders. And then you've also got the cave spiders. Now, I found a quintuple cave spider farm, or cave spider spawner setup. There are 5 of them. It's pretty quick when it comes to making string, which is also why these string farms are kind of useless. It produces like 50,000 string an hour. It's ridiculous. But other than that, spawners are kind of useless after the early game because you then have better forms of XP, and it just kind of drops off. Even if you build a massive mob farm, they're no longer useful. They're just sitting there, not really being used for anything. The only thing they're useful for is really making these copper farms, but you can also just separate out zombies from a general purpose mob farm for that. So that's why it's going on the B tier. The next 2 items to go on the B tier are the snowy items. So we have the snow, which can be used to make snow blocks and snow layers, and the powdered snow, which is a completely separate item. So the first one is the snowball. Like I said, it can be used to make snow blocks and snow layers. Really good for decoration. Snowballs can also be used to damage, or to, in air quotes, damage zombies, to make them duplicate themselves, using the mob spawning mentality. I don't know what it's called, but like the group spawning mentality. But other than that, not really that useful of a farm, but still pretty. It's like the moss. You can make a lot of things for it, especially on the detail front. But outside of that, really not that useful. Now the other one is the powdered snow. Once again, it's a really good way to texture things with the powdered snow, but powdered snow is also used for separating players who don't have leather boots on, for example, or to kill mobs. Like, it's a really good way to kill something like a blaze, or at least to damage a blaze as they sink through it. Or any of the nether mobs, they take extra damage from powdered snow. But powdered snow farms are so slow. You basically just put a whole bunch of cauldrons on a snowy biome, and then you wait for it to snow, and then it might fill up. It's really not that fast. It's a pain to set up, a pain to use. You need a lot of iron for it. Kind of not the best farm to put together. So that's why it's going on the B tier with its cousin, the snow. The next thing to go on the B tier is the bamboo farm. Once again, this is another really good source of fuel for your furnace arrays. But, to get a lot of this, you can't zero tick anymore. So to get a lot of this, you just need a bunch of bone meal or a massive area. And both of those things are kind of painful. Building a really big farm, I like building big things, but not everyone does. Using a whole bunch of bone meal requires building a big thing, or using one of these bone meal farms. Also not that fun. So, whilst it's a good fuel source, there are better ones out there, and it's kind of painful to set up, so it is going on the B tier. We're down to our second last item on the B tier, the Obsidian. Now, Obsidian is pretty useful for generating nether portals. I use a lot of them in my single player world to generate a whole lot of nether portals in places where I've built farms external to my base, or just to move around my pretty large area on my own really quickly. So it's going on the B tier because it's a really painful farm to set up. You need chunk loaders, and you need item droppers into ender portals, and you need a player to stand there and swing a pickaxe for hours and hours on end, and you'd just be better off to go out to the end and take down one of those big obsidian pillars, because otherwise it's just painful. You can also get obsidian really, really easily in the overworld, and if you want to figure out how to get water in the nether, you can also get a whole lot of it in the nether too. Again, only if you can figure out how to get water in the nether. That glitch is going to come for another video. The last thing we're going to put on the B tier is the sugarcane. Now, this may surprise some people. Sugarcane farms are a really, really easy farm to build. You either use flying machines or you use observers, and once they're running, they don't really stop. They're a really good farm to build for a beginner when it comes to farms. But outside of that, there's not many uses for them. You can use them to make firework rockets and paper, and you can also use them for villager trading, but they're kind of boring. Everyone makes one at some point, and outside of that, not really that useful. So That's why it's going on the B tier. Now, it is the final item of B tier. We are going to move up to A tier. Now, these are some quality farms up here. Really useful in your Minecraft world, but, you know, there's still better ones. So, let's go to A tier now, and we are going to start that off with the Shulker Shell farm. Now, Shulker boxes are an amazing item. You can fill them up with items and then break them, and they don't drop their items everywhere like a chest does. Really, really smart idea from Mojang to put these in the game. But Shulker farms are so painful to set up. You need to get a Shulker, like the Shulker mob, back into the overworld, set up a whole bunch of nether portals that are synced correctly, and then make sure that the Shulker can only teleport into the nether portals. It's really painful to set up, but once it's set up, it's really, really useful. So that's why it's going on the A tier. Such a useful farm, but incredibly painful to set up. That's enough of that. The next one that goes up there is going to be the Cobblestone Farm. Now, Cobblestone is a very versatile item that most players have a fair bit of. I have, I think, 20 double chests of the stuff sitting around on my single player world from digging out a massive hole. It can be smelted into stone to make a whole lot of stone, or it can be used in a whole bunch of crafting recipes. Pistons need them, observers need them, just to name the redstone components. What else? I mean, if you look over here, you can probably see some more stuff that requires them. Levers need them. There's a lot of uses for cobblestone, and it's a really good decoration block. So it's going on the A tier. It's not quite an S tier because, you know, most people have a whole lot of it sitting around, but it is a relatively good farm to have lying around. The next thing we're going to put up there is, where is it? This egg here. Now, this is a villager egg. Because villager farms, villager trading centers are one of the most overpowered things since 1.14 came out. You can re-roll villagers till you get the mending books or enchanted books that you want. You can re-roll them to get whatever trades you want. It just takes a little bit of time. The bigger problem, if it wasn't for this next problem, they would be an S tier. But they are such a pain to work with. Villagers never do what you want. They're annoying, they're painful, and that's why they're on the A tier and not the S tier. You can get so many items from villagers. I get a lot, most of my items from villagers because they do produce a lot of really, really useful stuff. They just suck. They're not fun to work with. No, I don't think anyone likes working with villagers. If anyone actually likes working with villagers, not talking about the results they put out, but just actually likes working with villagers, drop a comment. It's just, I need to know if there's someone out there who likes these things. I hate them so much. That's enough of me ranting about how much villagers suck, though, because the next thing we're going to put up there are the melon and pumpkin farms. So if I go over here, grab my melon and my pumpkin. Now, these are useful for one purpose: trading with villagers. They're efficient, they produce a lot of emeralds when you trade them, and, you know, melons can be an okay source of food. Pumpkin pie is also a source of food, but there are better foods out there. They're essentially just used for trading with villagers. They kind of make crop farms, which are down here in the C tier, obsolete because you need, like, without curing the villagers, you need 6 pumpkins to get 1 emerald, and you need 4 melons. That's pretty easy to get from a melon and pumpkin farm. It takes like 2 seconds for those to pop out, especially if you build a big enough one. I built a chunk-sized one, and it kind of filled up the storage system in a day. They're very efficient, produce a lot of items, but they're really only useful for the one purpose. But they are also a really fun farm to put together. Really basic, really efficient, really fun for someone who's just getting into making some farms. So they're going up there on the A tier. The next thing we're going to put up there is the Ender Pearl and the Wither Rose. Now, these are kind of the same farm, but also kind of not. So you can set up an Ender Pearl farm in the end, obviously, pretty much anywhere you like, so long as everything is spawn-proofed around it, or there are no other spawning spaces, i.e. down the bottom of the world. They're a really useful item. They teleport the player wherever you throw them. C. They can be used in Ender Pearl stasis chambers. See one of my other videos, link in the down there part. But, you know, other than that, they're not super useful. Now, the Wither Rose, on the other hand, can also be produced in an ender pearl farm. You set up a wither in the end, in one of those weird end gateways that takes you to the outer end. You break the end gateway by using some trickery, get a wither stuck in there, and then it kills a bunch of endermen, produces ender pearls and wither roses. Now the wither roses have a very special property in that they only allow wither skeletons to spawn on them, which is very, very useful for setting up a wither skeleton farm. See later in the video. Wither roses are also a really good killing mechanism for a general purpose mob farm. But other than that, that's really their only use. Oh, and they're also used for black dye. That's why the squid farm is down here in the D tier, because it's painful, and wither roses are a much less painful way of getting a whole lot of black dye really, really quickly. More efficient than a squid farm, more black dye, and just generally better. So that's gone up there in the A tier. The next thing that's going to go in the A tier is the Trident farm. So Trident's obviously a throwable item. They're going to go up here in the A tier. Now, they're really useful for making, or as a weapon in your survival world. You can enchant them with a number of different things. Riptide chucks you around when you're in water. With channeling, lightning strikes, etc, etc. Like, there's a lot of really versatile things you can do. You can also make some really loud noises by abusing the lightning mechanics. But other than that, not too many uses. Now, the farm is pretty easy to set up. You just need a drown farm. So, you know, really easy to set up. Might take a bit of time, but relatively easy. That's why it's going on the A tier. It's also a pretty fun one to put together, and seeing a whole lot of tridents in a chest is incredibly satisfying because they're a relatively rare item in the game. Now, the last thing that is going to go on the A tier is the general purpose mob farm, which I don't actually have a symbol for on my board, so I'm going to grab some rotten flesh. Now, the general purpose mob farm is really, really useful. You can use it as a killing farm, you can use it like to get a whole lot of XP, or you can just use it for its items. But it's a really useful farm to get bones and string and gunpowder. Produces them at a relatively lower rate than a specific farm, but you get all the items for one project. And all you really need to do to get more items is AFK there for longer. So that's why it's going on the A tier. It's a really good project to put together. I really enjoy making them. I like moving mobs around. That's kind of my thing. So that's why it is going up here on the A tier in my tier list. So we're going to now move up to the S tier. These are some top tier farms. Honestly, so good. I love the farms that are about to go up here. The first thing we're going to put up there is the iron farm. Now, iron is used for everything. Hoppers, that's all, like cauldrons. There's a lot of uses for it, and it's just, iron is always the bottleneck. Now, you could go mining it, but just make an iron farm. That thing up there, one layer of that produces 1,000 iron an hour. That thing up there, like that's got 4 layers, it produces 4,000 iron an hour. Now, I'm working on more iron farms around the place. Spoilers, hut. You'll see those in a few months. Yeah, that's the one layer. That produces a bit over 1,000 iron an hour. Really, really useful. Really fun farm to put together, especially if you use just Doc M's small farm. It doesn't take long to set up his farm. I'll put a link to my video and his video in the down there part. Now mine, bit bigger, bit more bulky, but a bit more efficient than Doc's farm. So, you know, you've got a number of different things you could put together for the iron farm. So that's going up there on the S tier. The next thing that's going up there is something that's a real pain to mine. The oak, or the wood farm. Now, wood is really, really painful to get normally. You have to go and break a whole bunch of trees, and then put them in shulker boxes, and then transport them back home. It just takes hours to collect a whole lot of wood for something like a sorting system or hoppers. A tree farm mitigates all of those things. You stand there for 5 hours, holding down right click with saplings in your hand, and you will get a whole lot of logs popping out the bottom. Just search tree farm on YouTube and there will be hundreds of videos on it. Really, really useful farm. Puts out a lot of items if you build it right, and just mitigate, or just completely removes the painful process of going out and collecting wood. I hate collecting wood. It's painful. That's why it's going up there on the S tier. Like the iron, such a useful item in the game. Honestly, could not live with, like, you literally cannot live without it. So it's gone up there on the A tier. The next thing that's going up there is the Piglin Bartering. Piglin Bartering. Now this also has to come with a gold farm, so that's going up there on the S tier too. Now, the Piglin Bartering farm produces something like 18 different items. It produces iron, it produces obsidian, crying obsidian, gravel. I could go on. It produces so many items, and all it requires is a bit of gold, or a lot of gold, depending on how big you want to make it. But it's just really, really useful. I mean, it produces ender pearls, which are in the A tier. It produces an awful lot of items for just standing there and flicking a lever and just letting it run. It's not a hard farm to set up, especially once you've got the gold and the piglins. So I would seriously recommend getting one of these in your world. They're just so useful. They produce so much stuff, and you don't have to go out and collect gravel anymore. Like, I mean, this whole board is made out of concrete. That requires gravel to make. There's other things that require gravel in this world that I can't exactly see from here, nor can I remember because I'm dumb. But they exist. So that's why it's up here on the S tier. Really, really cool farm, fun to make, and produces an awful lot of items. Now, the other one up here is the gold farm. Now, gold is required for piglin trading, but I mean, Ilmango made a incredible gold farm design. I might remember to put the link in the down there part. If I forget, I'm sorry. But it produces so much gold and an awful lot of experience for the player. And the experience is really important, actually. It's one of the best forms of late game experience. You can produce thousands and thousands of levels using that. So it's going up there on the S tier as well. So many levels, so many items, and honestly, a really cool farm to put together too. Requires a lot of magma, but like I said, not hard to gather yourself. So it's up there on the S tier as well. The next thing going up there on the S tier is going to be the Gunpowder Farm. Now, gunpowder, very, very useful farm. Useful item. Used to make TNT, used to make fireworks. I use fireworks all the time to fly around my world using my elytra. Just really, really useful farm to have, and having it a specialized gunpowder farm is a really efficient way of putting it together. The next thing going up there is the Wither Skeleton Farm. Now, the Wither Skeleton Farm, I've mentioned it before with the coal, but specifically Wither Skulls. They're used to make withers, obviously, which drop nether stars, which are used to make beacons. Beacons, just, they're the best. They are used to, for example, make you instant mine stone, or regenerate when you get hit by guardians, or anything like that. Amazing farm. Make one in your world. It's a massive project, but once it's done, you feel great, and you get a whole lot of wither skulls. Brilliant farm. Put one together like today if you can. Just chuck Wither Skeleton Farm in YouTube. Something will pop up. Absolutely phenomenal farm. Just build one. Beacons. You need beacons in your world. Build a Wither Skeleton Farm and collect a whole bunch of Wither Skulls. Do it. The next thing going up there on the S tier is the Redstone Farm. Now, you might think, well, how do you make redstone? Witches drop redstone when they're killed. Witch huts also produce, or they spawn witches whenever a player comes into the vicinity. Now, if you isolate all the spawning spaces in your or in the spawning sphere of the player into the witch hut, then it produces thousands of witches an hour. A ridiculous farm to put together. It's a lot of work, but once you've put it together, so much redstone will come out. Now, Psycraft put together an array of 20 witch huts. You don't need to do that. They're insane. They make the most insane builds that I've ever seen. You don't need to make 20 witch hut array to get redstone. A normal player like you or me needs just one witch hut with a perimeter around it, or just blocked off all the spawning spaces and using that as your redstone farm. You'll get more than enough, trust me. Really cool farm together. Really cool farm to put together, a lot of fun to make, pretty big project but really satisfying, and produces one of the most useful items in the whole game. Redstone, we need it. The next two items that are going up there on the S tier are also redstone based. So we have the slime farm and the honey farm. Now, you might be thinking, oh yeah, the slime farm, really useful for making sticky pistons and slime blocks, but the honey farm, well, you can take these honey blocks, and if I go in, oh, I don't have crafting. You can use them to craft honey blocks, which are then used like slime blocks. You can see a whole bunch in my vertical piston door, which is up there, using flying machines that use honey blocks, which are up the top there. They're the yellow ones, and the slime blocks, which is something you probably all recognize. So, really, really useful farms to put together. Especially the honey farm is a really good replacement for early game slime. No one wants to be digging out a massive slime chunk in the early game. So just use honey. Just use honey. Much, much better. Or at least in the early game. Eventually you do need both slime and honey. For example, my Shulker sorter system over there. Link in the down there part. So that's that's why those two items are up there. Now, we have one more item for the S tier, and that would be these Prismarine, or the Guardian Farm, which I'm representing with the Prismarine Shard. The Guardian Farm is once again an amazing project to put together. So much fun. I really enjoy putting Guardian Farms together. I haven't in a really long time, but clearing out all the water and then putting in the tanks and then having them drop, such a fun farm to put together. Produces so much XP, produces a whole lot of really cool items. I mean, you've got Prismarine, well, all of these Prismarine items. And you've also got sea lanterns, which is a really, really cool lighting block. Now, I need to set one of these up in my single player world because I'm sick of going and killing guardians to get sea lanterns. But just such a useful farm. Lots of XP if you don't have something like the Piglin Farm. It's a lot of work, but it is definitely, definitely worth it. So, that is the S tier. However, in Minecraft, some things are just overkill. Yeah, so there's actually going to be a tier above the S tier. Give me a second to build it. Let me introduce you to the what the heck tier. Now, the first thing I'm going to put up there is the ultra efficient Ghast farm. Now, you might have seen things with nether portals where the ghasts just kind of pop out the bottom of a nether portal which doesn't have a bottom attached to it and then fall down and die. What? Produces an awful lot of ghast tiers, an awful lot of gunpowder, but also abuses the game mechanics. So that's why it's going up here. The next thing that's going to go up here is the Overkill Witch Farm. Now, you may have seen this on a world tour for SciCraft or just on SciCraft in general. You can abuse the game mechanics to reset its RNG clock and produce a witch, or produce a full mob cap of witches in every game second. What? Those farms just chuck witches out the bottom. So you transport them into the nether, and then they just fall out of the bottom of this nether portal and get killed on magma blocks or just by fall damage. But it produces, like, it's so exploity that the SciCraft guys who exploit the game for fun decided it was almost too cheaty. They literally said, nope, we're not going to be using it. So that's going up there on the what the heck tier. The same goes for the Overkill raid farm. There is a kind of raid farm that just pops out too many, as in it's too exploity for Minecraft. I think it puts like 400 raids on the player, and then yeah, exploity what the heck tier. So that is my Minecraft tier list, or my Minecraft farms tier list. We have the poop tier down here. We have the D tier, the C tier, B, A, S, and what the heck. I hope you enjoyed me putting this into a tier list for you. Now, I just want to say, this is my tier list. This is not anyone else's, just my opinion. If you disagree, that's okay. I welcome it. Tell me what your favorite farm is in Minecraft in the comments below. For me, it's either the Iron or the Piglin Bartering farm. Two of my favorite farms right there. So, thank you all very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the thumbs up button. If you want to see more stuff from me, I'll have some links in the down there part, but also subscribe to the channel for future content, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.